When Kamen Rider Revice was first revealed to the world with a trademark leak, it wasn't really thought to be anything too remarkable. There wasn't much to decipher from the name. Revive, Revice, Device, and Revi's genes were just a few ideas for what could be the root of the word, although that last one wasn't that far off. We got a few rumors that said that Revice was supposed to be green and orange with red eyes and a dinosaur mouth, while the secondary rider was mostly black with orange highlights and a dinosaur helmet. The driver was green with a display and a dinosaur stamp, but was only worn by the green rider because these two were described to be the opposite of Kamen Rider Double's two bodies in one rider. Soon this was somewhat confirmed in an unprecedented turn of events, where our first look at Revice wasn't from a leak, but from the Superhero Senki poster officially released by Toei. The colors were off, but the design for Revice matched up perfectly to the rumors, while the different look for the other rider was speculated to be because of a form change, somehow relating to them also being a Kamen Rider Revice. A new set of leaked images featuring the character in the dinosaur outfit confirmed this form change aspect, and also showed off the logo of the show. The belt design was leaked soon after to confirm that rumor, while other pictures confirmed stamps to be this year's overall toy gimmick. With the new number 50 visuals coinciding with the 50th anniversary of Kamen Rider, we could see that this would also be somewhat of an anniversary show, with some of the original listings being Kuga Lion, Decade Shark, and 01 Giraffe. Toy listings confirmed that our mysterious dino friend wasn't a secondary rider, but was in fact connected to the main rider himself, while the real secondary rider would be using Evil Rider stamps, and another Evil Rider would be using Showa Rider stamps. When Superhero Senki released in theaters, not only did it feature a cameo appearance by Revice, but it was surprisingly double billed with a special episode giving a preview of the actual season. It was now revealed that Kamen Rider Revice was actually referring to the partnership of the human Kamen Rider Revi and his devil Kamen Rider Vice. Viewers in Japan were treated to the first henshin of Revice, his decade form, the plot of Iki and Vice utilizing Vice stamps to battle the Deadman cult, and the introductions to the rest of the cast. It was pretty much just an episode of the season made for theaters. The press conference was less than a week later, and it really only just revealed a few new toys and provided international fans with looks at stuff from the movie and the first looks at the actual show, given how the season had kind of already started with an episode already out there. The duo made their first televised debut in the final episode of Kamen Rider Saber, and then the following week the contract with the devil was signed. To be honest, the beginning of Revice was incredibly mediocre to me. I just felt like the show fell into the motions of a basic Kamen Rider season. Despite the unique premise with Iki and Vice as dual human and devil protagonists, it felt like their unique aspect was pretty quickly washed away. Part of this was because of the introduction of the other riders. Obviously, I don't mind seasons with a lot of Kamen Riders early on, but for this show specifically, it felt like an unnecessary undermining of the show's premise rather than in addition to it. On their own, I feel like Live and Gene had really awesome arcs building to their debuts, but sticking them right after each other just took away from the impact of all the riders. And Demons just straight up did not have a good debut since he was jammed into an episode that had nothing to do with him. None of the characters were horrible. Like, I thought the villains were bland and Vice was annoying, but for the most part, everything was enjoyable enough. It's just nothing was really that interesting. Maybe it's because the beginning was missing some kind of mystery or sense of urgency. The only bad part, I really think, was the Vice stamps. I think the Vice stamps are one of the worst gimmicks in Kamen Rider, from a story perspective at least. They're pretty cool toys. I like when form changes are the reward to a character going through some kind of arc in an episode or two, so that when the riders change forms, we get this visual demonstration that a character has grown emotionally. Revice kind of had the concept with how the Vice stamps need to be harvested from battles, but then after that, they're just really handed to Iki. Like, the first form change of the season, he's just thrown this gimmick for no reason other than we need to sell this overly expensive Vice stamp set. And then it gets worse as the show goes on. In episode 1, George establishes that Vice stamps have been stolen and we need to get them back so we can modify them to create forms for Revice. But then Revice is just able to use the prototype Brachio stamp to turn into a geoform before George has modified it. And then later we learn that there are hundreds of duplicate Vice stamps, and since again it seems like we can use them with no problem, it's like, what was the point of the beginning arc collecting all those Vice stamps then? I know it's to sell toys, but it felt like a really bad toy commercial rather than incorporating the Vice stamps into the actual story and making them interesting. The Vice stamps are a really annoying blemish on the show overall, but they're most egregious here combined with the mediocrity of everything surrounding them. I don't look back on this first arc fondly, but as it drew to a close and we moved into the second arc, I thought the show really picked up in quality, and for a few reasons. First off, power-ups are now important. Bodied Rex not only gave the original Vice stamps some kind of meaning, but it was a really good reward for Iki finally trusting Vice as his partner. So then the next evolution was him to accept Vice as a part of himself that he needs, leading to the both of them getting upgrades thanks to Volcano, complete with one of the greatest insert themes ever. Jack Revice was awesome because it flipped the dual protagonist gimmick on its head. Vice became the main character for a few episodes, turning the base form of the show into Jack Revice because nothing else was usable, and that was incredibly unique. And that's actually a great summary for why Revice became so much more enjoyable to me in the second half. It subverted a lot of standard Kamen Rider tropes from the last half decade, not only making a uniquely satisfying anniversary season, but also just making a cool standalone story. There were a lot of things in the first arc that were only brought up like once, like George's interest in Genta, Busan's research, and Hikaru's whole family. But then in the second arc, they're all paid off as foreshadowing. It's really interesting to me that what was originally just a group of civilian side characters eventually became a driving force of the show in multiple ways. The Demon's Driver is similar in that it just started off as a random belt, but then slowly turned into this incredible unraveling mystery. We go from one guy using a belt going, oh, this thing is alive, to said belt becoming one of the main generals fighting a whole mass-produced army utilizing that belt. We usually don't get some kind of ambiguity behind a belt and its powers, so I loved this technological evolution, and that's mostly due to one of the most interesting developments in the show. Since GIF was constantly being associated with this heartbeat sound effect and Genta was missing his heart, I assumed that we were gonna get a reveal that GIF was Genta's demon because of some evil dad Kamen Rider shenanigans or something. But instead we get this crazy reveal that the Demon's Driver has a name and existed just as a separate demon that was Genta's old partner when they fought as the original Kamen Rider. And then this reveals that the Igarashi siblings are descendants of GIF, and that's why they have demon partners. It's so cool to me that the show managed to merge so many plot elements into one insane development and change the trajectory of the show completely. While we have a good thing going, let me talk about the bad guys. I love that in this arc the Deadmans weren't defeated, instead the show took what it already had and reshuffled it. Monsters went from victims of the week to manifestations of the final boss. Olteca went from just one of the henchmen to the main villain, and Aguilera went from the pristine leader to an anti-hero with her own monster form. The stakes were raised without artificially adding any new elements. In recent years, Kamen Rider has had a tradition of either redeeming its original villains as hero Kamen Riders or murdering them. So I thought Julio's redemption was awesome for the unexpected elements, like only losing his monster form or the fact his name is actually Tamaki, but I was kind of worried the show was going to just repeat this for the others and make something unique, something repetitive. Instead, the current boss loses his monster form just a few episodes later so that he can become the new Kamen Kamen Rider demons. Once again, instead of introducing a new rider, the show just reshuffles its elements. It also just added to Olteka's presence in the show. He became a classic villain that you love to hate, but it was because of this unique element of a monster losing their monster form and assimilating another person's Kamen Rider persona. And even the concept of Olteka originally being Makoto is similar to Tamaki, but it's used in a different way where he actually hated his old life and becoming a villain was his escape. So he gets a really fitting end becoming Gift's final meal. Hanagulera definitely has my favorite story of the trio though. I just thought they did a really good job with her redemptive arc. A main villain acquiring their own monster form isn't usually used to signal their shift into an anti-hero, but it is here and it makes total sense. The cracks in Aguilera's ideology are shown pretty early on as well, like even when she teams up with Olteka again, she starts asking him to cut back on the amount of people he's sacrificing, so when she just stops being a villain, it was perfectly believable to me. The other element is that her relationship with Sakura, no matter how you interpret it, has been part of the show since the beginning. So after we learned that Aguilera has been part of the Dead Man's since she was a child, once she leaves that organization, it makes sense that turning her one rivalry into the thing that gives her new purpose just feels like the natural conclusion. Turning what was originally the main boss of the show into a supporting character for the tertiary rider is so crazy, and I just think it's neat. The last little cherry on top for the villains in this first half of the show overall that demonstrates how unique I thought Revice was willing to get is that the villains technically win. Olteka is defeated, but the original Dead Man's goal of reviving Gift just straight up happens. He is freed from his coffin and blasts off into green screen hell. So we got off to a rough start, but eventually I felt like Revice really found its groove. Even if I didn't like the new suits, I was still looking forward to the new stories we could get with the main villain fully revived. Now, it didn't happen immediately and definitely doesn't apply to every single aspect of the show, but Kamen Rider Revice disappointed me. Well, let's talk about the new villains. I think it's cool that when our big bad speaks for the first time, it's satisfying. I think it's great to finally get a big bad that's not randomly a Kamen Rider, and I think it's cool that he only fights the riders at the end of the show so we don't have this weird situation where the big bad is constantly defeated and the show doesn't become drawn out. Meanwhile, Akaishi is hilarious. Every time he does this weird laugh or this weird face, I just found it funny. He's really funny to watch in the show. I love villains that are pure evil but still just have this hilarious screen presence, and he definitely has both of that. And also, like Giff, he doesn't become a Kamen Rider. He has this monster form, and I enjoyed getting an evil general that just gets an upgrade to a monster form for the whole show. It's also interesting how these two end up seeing the Igarashis as their own family and want to save them from their destruction of the world, creating this twisted version of the hero ideals to save family. But then there's nothing else to them beyond that. I don't mind that Aikaishi's cartoonish personality can be out of place, but he doesn't really have anything going for him other than that. Somehow the show never addresses the fact that he founded the Dead Man's. It's just implied very explicitly to the audience, but it's never actually said out loud to the characters that this man founded the Dead Man's, and it is so strange. He's just a dude the heroes need to beat because he's evil, even though they explicitly set up that he had greater nefarious connections. Once again, Giff is similar. You would think that after the main villain is revived, the status quo of the show would change, but no, we go back to Monsters of the Week, and since he doesn't really do anything until the later half of the show, it kind of feels like he's only revived at the end of the show, so that whole thing was kind of wasted. So he pretty much has zero personality, and then once he's defeated by everyone, it's just like so unsatisfying. Oh cool, we defeated a statue. Just have someone harness Gift's powers after he's defeated so they can be the final boss, like Akaishi after he reveals he's the founder, or hell, use Olteka because he's just revived for no reason. What really brought Revice down for me though is that it ended up bringing back the original issues I had with it. Super important forms go back to being nothing. Ultimate Genome's development is more relevant to George, Masumi, and Genta. Writers just start popping up out of nowhere once again. I loved that the show chose to redeem Hana without making making her a suited character again, but instead she becomes Kamen Rider Aguilera and almost instantly fades into a background role, making me question why even make her a rider. Same thing applies to the Demon's Troopers. I love Foot Soldier Kamen Riders, and this was teed up to be one of the best because they're somehow the finale to this season-long storyline for a belt. Instead, the show doesn't really set up a need for foot soldiers, so it feels like they're introduced out of nowhere for no reason, and then they don't actually do anything important, so then, you know, why even involve them at all? I didn't initially like Hikaru because he's just handed the Overdemon's power set and then fades into the background like everyone else, but then he's given some tragic development and channels that energy to become the only Demon's Driver user to quadruple genomics, and I was like, oh cool, I think he's actually a pretty cool Kamen Rider guy now. And then he fades into the background again. Then Tamaki becomes the new Overdemons in an episode that has nothing to do with him, and the same mistakes are just constantly being repeated here. Genta is one of my favorite characters. I love having a wholesome, wife-loving dad in Kamen Rider, and I've already mentioned how much I love the Veil reveal, but after that event, Genta disappears and Kamen Rider Veil is never seen again? It's so strange to have such a big moment for a character and then never address how it affects that specific character, never have him interact with the rival that caused that reveal, never utilize that rider form identity that caused that big reveal. So while Deathstream's big fight is one of my favorite parts of the show, it got me to buy another premium Bandai belt, it doesn't actually feel like the finale to this big rivalry because it's never really present. And then Genta disappears again after this fight. It just feels like another pointless rider. All of the backstory for this is relegated to a side special, which is exactly what happens with Hiromi. I actually ended up really liking Hiromi. I loved how he just randomly shouts this catchphrase that's like really fun. So when we announce he's alive, it just feels so out of nowhere. Guys, this guy is not dead. Okay. And then when he comes back, he fades into the background again. There's too much happening here to the point where they had to throw some of it into some side specials. The worst offender of all of this to me though is Kamen Rider Juga. George was my favorite character. I loved how he channeled the anniversary aspects of the show as an in-universe Kamen Rider fan, and he also randomly blurts English, which is always funny.
What? Goddamn! Daddy, come on! Hey.
I also liked how he functioned within the show as this morally ambiguous developer behind the rider gear, and slowly became more heroic as the threats became more dire. It's so weird because on its own, I really like the concept of George finally making a unique rider system based on his favorite rider season, and attacking everyone just to see how powerful he can be really does fit his character at the beginning of the show. Instead, only after he's no longer an anti-hero, only after the final boss of the show has been defeated, does this plotline happen. I appreciated that the show didn't draw out the conflict with Gift for too long, but then it decides to do an about face and create a completely unnecessary conflict afterwards to extend the episode count. George is basically turned into a full-on villain, effectively eliminating all the character development he went through. He's the one who causes Iki to lose the remaining memories with his family, but by the next episode he's forgiven and everything's back to normal, so what was even the point? I hate premium Bandai. An unnecessary Kamen Rider that doesn't amount to much beyond a commercial kind of sums up my biggest problems with Revice, doesn't it? It's not just the main rider got a new toy and only used it once, it's that we had to introduce so many new suits, so many new characters, and it just got so bloated. I guess the subversions really got too out of hand because I definitely wasn't expecting my opinion on the whole show to be soured because they retconned and ruined one of my favorite characters. Alright, I've said a lot of negative things about Revice, but I do admit I do come out of it with an overall positive opinion because of the main family dynamic. Having the main 3 riders of a season be a sibling trio is so unique, but it also leads to a lot of wholesome interactions and interesting character arcs. Daiji's my least favorite, but I don't hate him. It was super intriguing to have one of the siblings rid themselves of their demon, only for them to become so stuck in their idea of what's right that they think the the only way to save everyone is to painlessly let the villains win. There's some really cool imagery with roles being reversed as he becomes this fallen angel. The resolution with Daiji learning that to be so pure is actually a detriment and he needs his demon was a great conclusion. My problem is how we got here. Kagero is barely in the show. Due to the nature of this power set, it seemed like we get a lot of these characters swapping around, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. But after his introduction, Kagero only appears a few times. And unlike his demon siblings, if he's not physically present as Kagero, he may as well not even exist. Kagero was never presented as that much of a nuisance to have the status quo be changed when he's gone. So when he's killed and Daiji goes off the rails, it doesn't feel like it's because he killed Kagero, it just feels like he's crazy. We needed Kamen Rider Live to be in a fight and suddenly he switches to Kamen Rider Evil and starts attacking everyone. We needed our introduction in an episode to just be Kagero in the bathhouse before Sakura slaps him and he switches back to Daiji. Even something as simple as Kagero shit-talking Daiji in his fights and messing with him would actually make him madder. We needed more Kagero so that we could lament his absence when he died, not just be sad we may never see him again. Meanwhile, Sakura is one of the best female writers of the last decade. It's really refreshing to have a female writer act with her own sense of agency. Weekend is such an integral part of the storyline, and she's our gateway into that world. As I stated earlier, I think Hana had a great storyline, and Sakura is obviously an integral part of that. It was cool to see her take matters into her own hands and go so out of her way to help a broken individual find their purpose. Making her the little sister is incredibly clever because she's able to have this somewhat feminine character arc about finding her own strength, but it's also just a great underdog story. Her catchphrase is a bit of an oxymoron, becoming invincible by accepting her weakness, but it just works. It makes for a satisfying debut for Kamen Rider Jean, in addition to a satisfying conclusion with Invincible Jean, the first tertiary rider final form ever? And it's an X-Aid reference. Alright, Sakura has my respect. Also, I think Love Cov is cute. I just love that Toei decided to make one of the demons a big plush person because it creates some hilarious shenanigans. I really love this random sibling trio of demons the show ends up with, and I wish they played that up a bit more. The best of these siblings, in my opinion though, is definitely Iki and Vice. As I mentioned, I really ended up enjoying their development as the show continued and they slowly began to put more faith in each other. But the part of their relationship I ended up loving the most was Iki's memory loss. His mantra very early on in the show was that he doesn't care what happens to him. His goal is just to protect others as a Kamen Rider, which I already find super endearing and a really wholesome characteristic. Introducing the concept of him losing his memories every time he protects others as a Kamen Rider flips this on its head and turns it into a heartbreaking, almost horrific storyline instead. But he just keeps on becoming Revice, fighting to save everyone no matter what happens to him, and I think that's amazing. He doesn't want to lose his precious family memories, but he also knows he needs to help fight and save people, creating one of the most interesting conflicts I've ever seen in Kamen Rider. There were a few fumbles to get there, but turning the final battle of the show into a duel between our two primary riders is an incredible concept. The evolution of this pair from a reluctant partnership to a well-oiled Kamen Rider to a shattered alliance to save something greater than their connection is such a unique storyline for a Kamen Rider season. Iki goes from being reluctant to transforming into Revi so he can stay with his family to putting all his memories with that family on the line just to save people. Seeing Vice's guilt over the cause of this and becoming willing to sacrifice everything for Iki is such a far cry from a selfish demon at the beginning of the show. There was a lot of enjoyable growth with these two characters, and it culminated in, dare I say it, the perfect ending to this kind of season. It utilizes the original unique concept of the show being about this duo of Kamen Rider Revice, and instead of having these huge stakes, it's simply about trying to save a family one one last time. When this is the best story of the show, it makes me wonder about everything else. Maybe this should have just been a small scale story about a family having to deal with a new demon family as they fight this cult. Throwing in all these other heroes and organizations and villains and side characters doesn't really fit with the small scale of the finale. It's a show about family, but there's so much else going on with the plot lines that a lot of the time the family aspects get thrown to the background and the show just feels a bit messy. It's too much. While I think Kamen Rider Revice managed to stick the landing, I think that it could have been so much more with so much less. Please let me know your opinion on the season down in the comment section, as I'd love to hear what different takes there are. I've also got a few more Kamen Rider videos on the way as well, so if you'd like to see those as soon as possible, be sure to check out my Patreon page or just hit the old-fashioned subscribe button, and I hope to see you next time.